Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the town of Owego. We're happy to have many guests here and Congressman Langworthy. We're going to speak today on some issues on the border, and I'd like to introduce some of the people up here with me. I have on my left is Under Sheriff Rich Hallett, and next to me is Marty Sowerby, our county legislator, obviously the congressman, Mayor of Waverly, Andy Aronston, and our Lieutenant John Dalmage. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Congressman Langworthy and let him start.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. First off, it's great to be here in Tioga County now that I officially represent Tioga County, just very grateful to have Tioga joining the 23rd Congressional District. Wonderful county. We've kind of united more of the southern tier in this district now, and I'm thrilled to be representing it in the halls of the House of Representatives, and thanks for the warm welcome here as always. And thank you all for joining me here today. I want to talk about something that's at top of mind for many people, and that is the crisis at our southern border. And earlier this week, I had a briefing with Buffalo Ice. While Buffalo Ice's headquarters is in downtown Buffalo, New York, on the other end of the district, their territory, it's important to know, is 48 counties across the state of New York. It's basically all of New York north of the New York City metropolitan area. So they have a huge task ahead of them. What they're undertaking across the country is happening across New York as well. And I wanted to discuss with them how their operations have changed since President Trump took office and his executive orders have come online. It has been just 10 days since President Trump was sworn into office, and he is following through on his commitment to secure our border and to conduct those important deportations. Starting with the most dangerous criminal illegal immigrants who pose a threat to our safety and our security of our nation, those known criminals and those that pose a national security risk. When just last week, Colombia refused to accept their own citizens earlier this week, President Trump showed the world that he means business, and within 6 minutes of him threatening major economic sanctions for Colombia not accepting their own citizens back, the president of Colombia publicly backed down and immediately agreed to take their citizens back and let those flights land in Colombia. That's what strong leadership looks like. That's what strength on the world stage for America looks like. We say what we mean, and we mean what we say, and the rest of the world will understand that. And we saw that play out then. We also, since then, have had China agree to accept their nationals that have come here illegally back to China. You have Mexico now being much more cooperative than they were. And this is about the safety and the sovereignty of our great United States of America. It's what the American people demanded in November at the ballot box when they put President Trump back in the White House and they elected Republican leadership to the U.S. Senate, but also to the U.S. House of Representatives once again. Whether it's moving active duty troops to our southern border, to the targeted raids for violent criminals, to enhance vetting for visa applications, or reinstating the Remain in Mexico policy. This is bold and decisive action that we desperately needed to get this crisis under control. These are common sense policies that prioritize the safety and the security of the American people. And that needs to be the number one priority of elected officials at all levels, to protect and to serve the taxpayers. And I want to thank our law enforcement officials here for the job that you do every single day. And you do it, and you do it valiantly, and it's so critical to the public that we know we have law enforcement to turn to keep us safe. There are too many that have forgotten that mission and that have chosen to put the safety of our citizens at risk in the name of a dangerous and woke agenda. you have to ask yourself a simple question. Do you stand with public safety? Do you stand with American sovereignty in stopping the scourge of fentanyl that has come into every community in America? Or do you stand with the cartels, the big multi-billion-dollar enterprises that are exploiting our country's weakness the last 4 years in profiting off of the deaths of Americans? We have allowed those cartels to grow into a behemoth drug and human trafficking operation. And it is going to take tremendous resources to undo the damage of the last 4 years. The essentially erasing of the southern border that took place to truly take our country back and reinstitute law and order. It defies common sense that as a nation, we allowed this to happen. And you can't look at this situation without thinking this was purposeful. That we allowed, we don't know the true number, north of 10 million, hopefully less than 20 million people to come into this country illegally. Criminal aliens are hiding in plain sight. Some quietly planning terrorist attacks, like the Afghan national who, by God's grace, was apprehended and his plan was thwarted before he was able to execute a murderous rampage on Election Day, which would have sent shock waves across the country and would have scared people from going to the polls. I'm even brought to a case that was cracked by Buffalo ICE just last year, right in Endicott, down the street, where a dangerous Peruvian killer who was wanted for 23 murders in his home country, such a callous, cold-blooded killer that he had his 23 victims' images or names tattooed across his body. That was allowed to happen because we weren't enforcing the southern border. We had gang members, rapists, child abusers, drug dealers. Some of the worst criminals you could imagine have exploited America's lax immigration policies. We witnessed the horror of a young and innocent woman, Laken, who was murdered by an illegal immigrant who was arrested for abusing a minor right here in New York State. But instead of being deported, he was released back into the community thanks to New York sanctuary policies in our idiotic bail reform laws that did not hold him. They let him right back out so he could go and proceed to Georgia, and Laken is no longer with us. The elected officials responsible for those laws have Laken Riley's blood on their hands. It's as simple as that, and we need to call that out. My heart ached last week watching Laken's mother at the White House for the signing of a law in her daughter's name. And every year from here on, that family will have an empty seat at their table at the holidays. And that didn't have to happen. It was because of the choice of certain elected officials in this country that our laws were not enforced. And I was very proud to vote for that bill, not once but twice, because it's common sense. And any illegal immigrant who is charged with a violent crime should be detained, plain and simple. While we can never bring Laken back, we can ensure that no other lives are stolen in the same manner. And these criminals should not be roaming our streets. We can ensure that no other mother has to bury a child because a dangerous policy that puts criminals before innocent citizens. And don't think what happened in Georgia can't happen right here in the southern tier. Just yesterday, less than an hour away in Ithaca, a violent illegal with a very lengthy rap sheet was released back into the community after being charged with assault. Now, local law enforcement refused to cooperate from Tompkins County, refused to cooperate with ICE because they have sanctuary policies there. And this needs to be outlawed and banned. I mean, you should not be able to choose to not enforce federal laws. Now, thankfully, ICE was one step ahead of the local law enforcement. And at great risk to their own safety, they were able to apprehend this criminal and take him into federal custody. But what kind of world are we living in where this is the action of a locality? It's absolutely infuriating. I don't care if Tompkins County wants to be a socialist haven for violent criminals, but there is nothing stopping them from crossing into bordering communities like right here in Tioga County or Broome County or any of the other counties in the southern tier and risking the lives of residents. It's absolutely unconscionable, and there needs to be accountability. There are an estimated 759,000 illegal immigrants residing in just the 5 boroughs of New York City alone. It's bad enough that thanks to New York sanctuary policies, taxpayers have been forced to foot the bill for taxpayer-funded housing, taxpayer-funded meals, taxpayer-funded health care, and they've even given them debit cards. More than $2 billion in state tax money has been spent for illegal migrants, while hardworking taxpayers in this age of high inflation have been really struggling to make ends meet. But what's more damning is the impact on public safety. Of the more than 700,000 illegals that are here, an estimated 58,000 are either convicted felons or facing serious criminal charges, some from their home country, some while they're here. And thanks to a law called the Green Light Law. They always put these nice names on the laws. But the Green Light Law was the policy that gave driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. But a provision that's not as well known that I want to bring attention to here today, within that law that New York State passed, is a prohibition on our local law enforcement from sharing the New York State DMV database with federal law enforcement officials. This law is incredibly dangerous, and it's downright idiotic. Governor Hochul is putting New York citizens and law enforcement officers across the state at risk with this S9 policy. And it can be rescinded, and she should make it an absolute priority to get rid of this. Everywhere I go, I talk to local law enforcement about how detrimental this law is to them. And it was, I spent a day last summer with the Office of our Border Patrol agents, and it was their number one priority to see change there. And with Buffalo Ice, it was none different, because they're taking their lives into their hand with every single car they pull over. They can't run the plate. They don't know who's behind the wheel. And they don't know if they're dealing with a known murderer or who is driving that car. And we've had far too many funerals for law enforcement in the last few years, and we can't afford any more. The time for action is now, and Albany needs to get to work. Governor Hochul can lead on this issue. She can rescind it. It's the right thing to do, and she should do it given the crisis that we're facing. But as a border state, we've seen 1,000% increase in illegal crossings in some portion of the northern border between the U.S. and Canada. This law poses huge risks to our national security. In 2024, border agents in the Swanton sector that covers more than 200 miles from Maine on down to the St. Lawrence River, they apprehended more than 19,000 illegal migrants from 97 different countries. That includes 300 suspected terrorists right at the northern border of the United States and Canada. I recently sent a letter along with 4 of my Republican colleagues in the New York delegation urging Governor Hochul to do the right thing and to repeal the provisions of this law that restrict cooperation between local law enforcement, New York State troopers, and our federal law enforcement officials. I'm going to do everything I can at the federal level. We're looking for every possible solution to bring attention to how dangerous New York sanctuary policies are. In another ironic development, I learned from the ICE agents at the Buffalo sector that while our local law enforcement is prevented from sharing that data with U.S. federal officials, they frequently and on a daily basis share that data with Canadian federal officials. So if you're looking to cross the Peace Bridge in Buffalo to go into Canada, Canada can pull your record and see if you have any prior convictions. But they won't do that with our own federal officials. I find that maddening and absolutely hypocritical. As a member of the House Oversight Committee, we just announced an investigation into the policies of sanctuary jurisdictions like New York and how they're threatening the public safety of our state. We are going to be holding a hearing on February 11th where we are going to continue exposing how leaders of these sanctuary jurisdictions across the country are putting criminals ahead of law-abiding citizens. In the coming weeks and the months, we will be working hand in glove with President Trump and his administration on sweeping legislation that will address this crisis and will put as much as we can into statute, into law, so that no future president can undo the laws of the United States of America with a simple executive order and a swipe of a pen. I want to once again thank our brave men and women in uniform, whether it be our U.S. Border Patrol, Buffalo ICE, all those agents across the country that are doing this critical mission right now. I also want to thank our local law enforcement officials, our Tioga County Sheriff's Office, but also those municipal departments across the southern tier that are working very hard every single day, and we owe them a debt of gratitude, not just today, but every day, for keeping our community safe and doing a very difficult and thankless job. They just want the tools to do their job, and they don't want their arms tied behind their back with things like the bail reform law, and we owe it to them to give them those tools so they can get home safely to their families. We owe it to their spouses and their kids as well. It's a new day in America, and I just want our law enforcement officials to know that we have your back in Washington. And we will do that every single day. We'll take whatever actions are necessary. The rule of law and order and our nation's safety are once again paramount. And with that, I will take any questions from the media.
So who has going back to that Ithaca example you said in Tompkins a couple days ago, or yesterday, who has the jurisdiction when it comes to these sanctuary city laws? Does federal law override city law, or kind of how does that situation work?
Well, these are local provisions, whether it's a state that's declared itself a sanctuary state. I mean, this started with New York City, and this was in reaction to President Trump saying he wanted to seal the border in his first term of office, that every blue state, the cities particularly, ran so far to the left to create these sanctuary city policies, and they declared, essentially, that federal laws don't apply within that jurisdiction. I don't believe they're on sound legal footing in that, because we're all citizens of the United States of America, and you can only have one federal law at a time. They are not enforcing federal laws, and that's essentially what you've had here. In Tompkins County, they knew full well that this individual was going to be federally detained, and they let him go anyway because of their sanctuary policies, and what the outcome they wanted was this criminal back on the streets. Luckily, our federal officials were nearby. He was apprehended. He's been taken to Syracuse for proper arraignment and legal processing, and the wheels of justice will turn there. But this is the one upstate example that we have to point to of these policies going wrong. I mean, in New York City, they just turned a blind eye to everything. And I want to make it abundantly clear. I am pro-immigration. We have legal immigration. But every one of these people that has come into this country outside of that legal system, it's a slap in the face of those that waited in line, have spent the thousands of dollars processing the paperwork and going through the proper vetting and the security clearances to go through that legal immigration process. There's also a fountain of misinformation that I think that we have to fight back against. One, I see social media, but I've been asked questions, particularly with the Buffalo media, that I think it's important to dispel. There's talks that there's raids happening at schools. I am assured by the officials at Buffalo ICE there are no raids at any schools. This is a very calculated, meticulous effort to go find the known criminal element within this illegal population and find it, detain it, remove it. These are people that are known criminals, and these are people that are deemed as threats to national security. This isn't about schools or churches, and frankly, at this point, not about women or children. This is about known male criminals, and the White House has been sending out through social media channels the cases as they apprehend them one by one, and you can see the crimes that they are convicted of. I mean, there's an awful lot of endangering the welfare of children. There's child rape. And this is the worst of the worst that we have to get out of this country. Our communities aren't safe when they are present. And, you know, President Trump wasn't wrong. He was vilified by many in the media when he said that these countries have opened their jails. There's a lot of evidence to point to the fact that they went out of their way to send their criminal element to the United States of America, saves them a lot of money from detaining their criminals, and now it's our problem. Well, we're going to send that problem right back to the point of origin. And I'm going to work with the president and my colleagues in Congress to make sure that we have the federal resources necessary, both on a funding level and manpower level, to get this job done. Because protecting our homeland is critical. I mean, we've seen, you know, a rise in Islamic terrorism. You know, and this isn't just about Mexico or Central America. There are 197 countries at last count that I saw that have sent people here to this country that have crossed that southern border or the northern border illegally. The world needs to know we mean business, and strong borders are the first way to start that. You have to seal those borders, and I saw it in real time. I was sitting in the rotunda at the Capitol while the president had just taken office. There was a lull in the program, and I checked, you know, to see what people were saying about his speech, and I saw footage from the El Paso border where the officials were, you know, announcing in Spanish over the border that this port was now closed, and that is bold and decisive action. And that's what President Trump has done, and that's what we will have his back on.
You mentioned securing that funding to really get the border secured and everything. What aspects do you think would benefit the most or need the most support through this funding to really be able to get that job done this year?
Well, we need obviously more agents. You know, the agencies need more manpower, for sure. They also need more vehicles. The vehicles on the southern border are in disarray, have been allowed, that fleet has been allowed to deteriorate. They need more detention facilities. And, you know, the federal government only owns 6 detention facilities. One is actually in Batavia, New York. So, but it's not big enough. And they contract with local law enforcement for beds in various municipalities, you know, perhaps some here. But that's between you know, the different federal agencies and the municipalities. They enter into agreements. But I think that's why you've seen President Trump and then Secretary Hegseth unpack a plan where they would like to build a 30,000 bed facility in Guantanamo Bay so that we can have a staging area for detention and then deportation back to the country of origin. I mean, again, the numbers are staggering. I mean, we're talking 10 million illegal crossings. You know, many have to go through the paperwork process of their asylum paperwork that was rubber stamped. Everyone that I consider a subject matter expert in this area assures me of all the asylum documents that have been filed in this country that there was perhaps 8 to 10% of those that actually filed for asylum are actually entitled to asylum under our laws. There's been wild abuse of those loopholes and documents that the Biden administration knew wouldn't pass muster, but they let it happen anyway. They made it so easy, they created an app so you can self-report yourself and then proceed into the country like you're ordering a pizza or something. I mean, those days are done. That app was shut down at 12 on the nose. We mean business. The country's borders are secure. We're putting the manpower with our military force there to make sure that we're no longer being taken advantage of. And that's what the American people asked for on Election Day, and that's what they're getting.
And then going back to sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, with these deportations going on, I assume that there's probably going to be lawsuits coming out between the states and the federal government. If those do arise, does that then constitute taxpayer money being put into fund these lawsuits?
Well, I'm sure these sanctuary jurisdictions, for some reason, would like to, I don't know how, and I guess it's up to you in the media to ask the question of certain Democratic leaders like our governor, why do you put the criminal element of the illegal immigrant population or just the regular American criminals, why do you put them in front of law-abiding taxpayers? Because our bail reform laws have just said the peace-loving public be damned. We need to be on the side of the criminals and those that are behind bars for a reason. And now, our law enforcement officials, they can't hold these people. They go, you commit a fairly serious crime and you're out the door that day. You don't even, you create more paperwork for these guys than any of the burden that is on the criminal. And that's why you're seeing selective enforcement in places, because it's too burdensome for what the outcome is, and why people are turning the other a blind eye to certain crimes that create quality of life issues for all of our taxpayers. We have to ask the question out loud, and that accountability needs to happen. Whose side are you on? Do we want a civil, safe society for our kids and our grandkids and our strong future, or do we want streets that the criminals run that we happen to have to live in? And that is what I think all Americans need to ask of all of their levels of government. And the people joining me here today, they believe in law and order. And our district strongly believes in law and order. I mean, we heard that loud and clear in November, and overwhelmed by the support that we've received. But I want to dispel myths out there, because there's those that are trying to sell a false narrative. This is about taking the country back and getting a very dangerous criminal element out of this country right away. And we have to do that. We owe that to every citizen here. So we have no more Laken Riley cases, because that family will never be made whole. I don't care how many laws or celebrations of laws we have. At least her death wasn't in total vain, but there are a lot of deaths out there that have happened at the hands of criminal illegal immigrants that have been in vain, because nothing has come from them. And we need to remember those families, because those things did not have to happen. This was a choice by the Biden administration to not enforce the laws of the United States of America. And it should not be optional to enforce laws that are actually on the books. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.